Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you are around the world. We're just going to wait one more minute while people join, and then we'll start our webinar on high touch, high tech. So just one more minute while people join the call. Thank you for waiting. Okay, I'm going to get started. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining our webinar today. We're really excited to be able to share our work on high touch, high tech with you all. The webinar is called Supporting Teachers to Harness Digital Personalized Learning to Accelerate Learning Outcomes, Our Experience of High Touch, High Tech. I'm Amy Bellinger. I'm the Director of the Learning Generation Initiative at EDC, and I'm delighted to be co-hosting this webinar with Fab AI, with whom we have worked with for many years. The webinar will feature implementation lessons from our High Touch, High Tech initiative, which is an approach that brings together the unique strengths of teachers, the high touch component, with the AI adaptive learning technology, the high tech component, to personalize education and improve learning outcomes. This is an approach that we first tested in Vietnam back in 2019, and since then we've worked with Uruguay, Philippines and Cambodia to adapt it for their context. To give you a quick overview of what we will cover today, first, we will hear a short keynote address from Professor Juho Lee, who actually coined the term high touch, high tech. Then one of our funders, Paige Rogers from the Equinix Foundation, will give some opening remarks. Following this, we will have a short presentation on high touch, high tech, explaining what it is and the impact it's had. And then we will move into a moderated panel discussion with the people that are actually implementing high touch, high tech on the ground from Cambodia, Philippines and Uruguay. Then we will have audience Q&A, and I would encourage you to look for the Q&A button at the top of your screen, where if you post questions there during the presentation and the discussion, I will ask them at the end of the panel. And then finally, we will finish with some reflections from Fab AI about how they see this high touch, high tech work fitting in the broader AI for education agenda. So without further ado, I am thrilled to introduce Professor Juho Lee. Professor Lee is a professor of practice at Arizona State University's Mary Lou Fulton College for Teaching and Learning Innovation, and former acting president and acting prime minister of the Republic of Korea, as well as being twice Minister of Education. Professor Lee was also a commissioner of the Education Commission, LGI's predecessor organization, where I have had the privilege of working with him over several years. Professor Lee came up with the high touch, high tech approach after seeing it used in higher education at Arizona State University. He's been the visionary and driving force behind this work. So I'm delighted to invite him to speak about the original vision for high touch, high tech, what he led in Korea, and his thoughts on the potential for high touch, high tech in this age of AI. So over to you, Professor Lee.
Thank you, Amy, for your very kind introduction. Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to join you today. Classrooms around the world are experiencing a tremendous disruption as AI technology advances at an extraordinary pace. Teachers are witnessing every single day that students now need to learn in fundamentally different ways than before the age of AI. At the same time, many new approaches to integrating AI into education are emerging, leaving teachers uncertain about which direction they should take. I believe one of the greatest challenges facing global education today is that we have not yet reached a consensus on a new model of teaching and learning that can be successfully scaled across entire education systems. That is why high touch, high tech is so important and why today's webinar is so timely. As you know, high touch, high tech brings AI powered adaptive learning systems into the classroom so that teachers can provide personalized learning for every student. At the same time, it enables teachers to devote more of their energy to what only humans can do, serving as mentors, coaches, and role models who support students' personal growth and well-being. About 8 years ago, the Education Commission launched the first high-tech prototype in schools in Vietnam. Since then, the approach has expanded to Uruguay, Cambodia, and the Philippines. Across these very different national contexts, high-touch, high-tech has consistently demonstrated significant improvements in student learning outcomes through rigorous empirical evaluations. I'm sure today's presentations will provide many valuable insights from these experiences. Today, I would like to share several lessons from Korea's experience. As Korea's Minister of Education, I led a nationwide effort over the past 3 years to introduce high-touch high-tech into our public school system through AI digital textbooks. This experience reinforced four important lessons. First, the more rapidly AI technology advances, the more important high-touch high-tech approach becomes. The emergence of generative AI, beginning with ChatGPT, has created understandable concerns among teachers and especially among parents. We experienced exactly the same concerns in Korea. However, I believe the real question is not whether AI is good or bad for children. The real question is whether we can teach students to utilize AI wisely, creatively, and responsibly. If we fail to do that, students may simply become passive consumers or even passive servants of AI. Instead, we should help them to use AI to strengthen their learning, their cognitive abilities, their character, and their human connections. HiTouch HiTech provides a practical roadmap for achieving this goal. Second, teacher professional development is absolutely critical. Developing high-quality AI-powered learning systems is important, but transforming the role of teachers is even more important. For this reason, we invested substantial resources in teacher training and made it a top priority for the Ministry of Education in Korea. Looking back, however, I believe we still have much to learn. How we deliver effective professional learning at scale remains one of the greatest challenges, not only in Korea, but in every country represented here today. Third, we need much greater innovation in technologies that support the high touch side of education. AI is making remarkable progress in delivering knowledge content to students through adaptive learning systems. But technologies that help teachers nurture students' social emotional development, relational intelligence, and human connections are still in their early stages. I believe AI also has enormous untapped potential in this area. If we continue investing in these innovations, AI will not replace teachers. Instead, it will enable teachers to become even more effective while reducing administrative burdens and freeing teachers to focus on the uniquely human dimensions of education. Finally, we need a global platform to sustain and accelerate the high touch high tech movement. Based on Korea's experience, when educational transformation depends primarily on the top-down government leadership, progress can easily be interrupted by political transitions or shifts in national priorities. That is why we need an international community where countries continuously share evidence, exchange experiences, learn from one another, and build on each other's successes. I hope today's webinar will mark the beginning of an even stronger global movement for high-touch high-tech, one that enables governments, educators, researchers, and innovators to work together in shaping the future of learning. The age of AI presents us with extraordinary challenges, but it also offers extraordinary opportunities. Whether AI becomes a force that widens educational inequality or one that helps every learner reach his or her full potential will depend not only on the technology itself, but on the choices we make together. I believe high touch high tech provides one of the most promising paths forward. Thank you very much. It is an honor to be with all of you today, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Lee. You've always been such a visionary for this work, and I really like how you've reflected on and adapted that vision for high touch, high tech based on the continually evolving landscape of AI. And there's lots of food for thought there, particularly around, what teachers need support with and their unique perspective around relationships, etc. So thank you so much for setting the scene so nicely. So now I'd love to turn to Paige Rogers, who's the Executive Director of the Equinix Foundation and Director of Community Impact at Equinix, where she leads global philanthropy and community impact initiatives that advance digital inclusion and access to technology careers. We're very grateful to the Equinix Foundation and the Philanthropy Asia Alliance for their support for High Touch High Tech, and Paige will share why Equinix was drawn to this initiative. Over to you, Paige.
Thank you so much, Amy. Good morning and good evening, everyone. And a special thank you to the Learning Generation Initiative at EDC and Fab AI for having me here today. So I'm Paige Rogers. I am the Executive Director of the Equinix Foundation. And the vision of the foundation is a more accessible, sustainable, and interconnected digital future for everyone, everywhere. As Equinix is the world's digital infrastructure company, we're connecting the world through about 275 plus data centers in over 75 countries. So Equinix sits at the center of the digital economy. And it's for that reason, as we see firsthand how technology is transforming industries, it's creating jobs, it's opening up new possibilities. And we are seeing that there is not equitable access to the connectivity, the learning, the skills, the opportunities that will allow every individual around the world to participate fully and thrive in today's digital economy. And it's why we focus on digital inclusion, from connectivity to digital skilling to the technical opportunities of the future. And we do see that, still nearly a third of the world's population is offline, and so many more lack the skills and opportunities to benefit from what technology has to offer. And it's why the work of organizations and individuals that are with us here today, and what we just heard about the vision with HTHT is so critical. The Equinix Foundation is a member of the Philanthropy Asia Alliance. And so about 2 years ago, they introduced us to the work of HTHT through EDC. And we immediately saw how it resonated with our strategy and our focus on digital inclusion. We appreciate so much that it's not simply about the use of technology in education. As Professor Lee just shared, focusing on teachers and really equipping them with the tools and technology, we can see meaningful learning outcomes at scale over time. And that's exactly what we've seen over these last 2 years, where technology is the enabler with HTHT, and teachers remain at the center of the learning experience. So as a funder, it's critically important to see a model like that, and one that we've been very impressed with. Another thing I really appreciate about this work and the partnership is how the team with HTHT is really partnering with the community and taking a very collaborative approach. So they've brought together not only philanthropy and educators, but other local organizations, ministries of education, the administration themselves within the schools, the teachers, the students, the communities, and everyone is coming together around a shared goal to ensure that every child has an equal opportunity to learn and succeed. And so when we think about the future of AI in education and the role that it can play, I think that this level of collaboration is essential. And it's what we've been so impressed by with this initiative and with everyone involved. I mean, I think the most promising innovations require that level of collective action. It's where we're going to see technology and humans coming together to ensure that everyone can thrive. So it's with great gratitude to be a part of this. The foundation is very proud of the work that we get to see and witness through the HTHT initiative. And I'm thrilled to have you learn more about it with the remainder of this webinar. So thank you again, and I'll turn it back over to Amy.
Thank you so much, Paige. That was really lovely to hear, like the interest you had around teachers being the center and digital tools being the enabler, and also the importance of collaboration and community, which completely agree is what's needed for change to happen. So thank you so much for that. So now I have the pleasure of introducing my colleague, Satya Lankapin, EDC's Chief of Party for High Touch High Tech. Satya will give a brief overview of what High Touch High Tech is and its outcomes for students and teachers before we hear from the implementers directly. So Satya, over to you.
Thank you, Amy. And can I have the slide, please? And also thank you everyone for joining us. So in the next 10 minutes, I will give a quick overview of High Touch High Tech, or HTHT, what problem it is trying to solve, how the model works in classroom, what we have learned across several countries, and what this means for scaling. Next slide, please. HTHT starts with a very common classroom problem. Students are at very different learning levels, but classrooms often have to move at one pace. This is also where HTHT connects to a broader evidence base. Over the past 10 or 20 years, evidence from teaching at the right level has shown that students learn more when teaching is aligned to what they actually know and need next. But for teachers, doing this every day is difficult. So in many classrooms, teachers are working with large class size, limited time, and diverse student needs. Personalizing instruction requires good information about where students are and practical routines for responding to that information. So HTHT asks, how can we make this learning principle practical for teachers and students in real classroom? Next, please. HTHT combines two things: the high-tech component using assessment and adaptive content to meet students at their level and help them progress at their own pace. It gives students practice and feedback, and it generates learning data, and they're getting better and better every day with the power of AI. The high-touch component is the teacher. The teachers use that data to personalize teaching, to group students, to provide targeted support, to develop active learning and nurture higher order skills like critical thinking and collaboration, the human skills. So the model is not technology replacing the teacher, but it is the technology supporting the teacher to make instruction more responsive. Next, please. So this slide illustrate a week of HTHT. So, this is what HTHT can look like in practice. A student might learn a new concept with the whole class. Then during adaptive practice, the student works on questions at the right level and receive immediate feedback. The teacher then uses the data to decide what happens next. Some students may need reteaching, others may be ready for more challenging activities. Students may also work in small groups on applied problems linking mathematics to the real world, or they can do discussion or open-ended tasks. So throughout the week, the teacher is not stepping back and let the teachers learn from the computer. The teacher is using learning data to keep every learner moving forward. Next, please. So HTHT does not begin when the students open a device. It begins with careful design, choosing software that fits the curriculum, checking whether schools have the devices and connectivity to use it, and making sure teachers understand the learning purpose behind the technology. Then implementation is about turning the design into classroom routines. Teachers are trained to use the platform, but more importantly, to use the data. Who is stuck, who is ready to move ahead, and who needs mini lesson, and how groups should change from week to week. This is why coaching, PLCs, peer support, and data-informed planning are part of the model. And they are not extras. They are not just one-off, but ongoing. They are what help teachers connect the high tech to the high touch. And across all this, monitoring and evaluation are essential. The goal is not only to know whether students use technology, but whether teaching practice changed and whether learning improved. Next, please. So let me now turn to the evidence from HTHT pilots. I will move quickly across 4 country examples. The first example is Vietnam. So in Vietnam, HTHT was implemented as a grade 7 mathematics prototype with the Ministry of Education and Training, Arizona State University, and UK FCDO using ALEX. The evaluation found significant improvement in math learning, 0.436 standard deviations reported as equivalent to 2 years of learning in 1 semester. Importantly, the benefits were seen across student groups, with greater benefits for lower performing students. There were also teacher outcomes. The teachers reported stronger personalized teaching practices, more peer collaboration, and improved self-efficacy in motivating and engaging students. So Vietnam showed both student learning gains and a shift in teacher practice. Next, please. In Uruguay, HTHT was implemented with the BAL, Education Commission Asia, and the Inter-American Development Bank. The work covered grade 5 mathematics using Metific and grade 7 computational thinking using RoboGarden, reaching thousands of students and teachers. This is kind of a bigger scale. The Uruguay evidence is especially useful because it shows that usage and fidelity mattered. In math, students with higher use of Metific improved by 0.33 standard deviations. In computational thinking, students improve on average of 0.1 standard deviations, and higher, the students who has higher use of the platform was associated with larger gains. Students in high fidelity HTHT classrooms also perform better than those with lower fidelity classrooms. For teachers, HTHT improved perceptions of new pedagogical approaches combining EdTech and project-based learning. Next, please. In Cambodia, HTHT was implemented with Teach for Cambodia, the Ministry of Education, Philanthropic Asia Alliance, and the Equinix Foundation using Math Pathway, which is an AI-powered adaptive learning platform localized to Khmer language. This is an important example because it took place in low-resource public secondary schools with real constraints around devices, connectivity, digital readiness, and classroom conditions. And even in those conditions, the results were strong. The students in treatment schools improved their math score by 0.36 standard deviations, which is equivalent to about 8 additional months of learning. And we also found that the lowest performing students at the beginning were the ones who saw the largest gains. Teachers also observed that the student has changed, improved in their confidence, attendance, and participation. And for the teachers, the data helped them see learning gaps more clearly and responded through mini lessons, small group support, and targeted practice. We also found that teachers spend more time facilitating learning with greater emphasis on higher order skills. Next, please. The Philippines story is powerful because in some schools, HTHT did not start with a ready-made digital classroom. In Zambales, with Ayala Foundation, Department of Education, Philanthropic Asia Alliance, and Equinix Foundation, using Khan Academy for grade 4 to 6 math. The project helped schools build conditions for digital learning, including connectivity solutions such as Starlink, and also bring in the community to support the improvement of ICT spaces. But the real shift was in the instruction. After 12 weeks, HTHT students improved by 29 percentage points compared with 15 points among comparison students, which is about 4 additional months of learning. Students also reported more positive attitudes towards math and also higher grit. Teachers reported strong perception of personalized teaching and technology-based curriculum use. And by the end of the pilot, 85% of teachers were applying differentiated instruction, and 100% were using learner data in lesson planning. Teachers were regrouping students, targeting support, using Khan Academy as what one teacher called a teaching partner, not a replacement. Next, please. So across these pilots, one lesson keeps coming back. Scaling HTHT is not a simple rollout of devices or platforms. We think about scaling through 4 dimensions. Depth means learning gains, stronger teacher practice, and classroom transformation. Reach means expanding across different geographies and learner groups. Sustainability means embedding the approach in curriculum, in teacher development, in procurement, and in budget design. And equity, which means designing for digital device, language inclusion, and local constraints. And to protect the quality as HTHT is being scaled, we look at 7 domains. Is the system ready, and does it own the model? Do teachers, school leaders, and supervisors know their roles? Is the infrastructure strong enough for students to get enough practice? Is the product, the technology product, aligned to the curriculum and pedagogy? Is there a realistic delivery routine in the school week? Is there enough time and enough curriculum space for it? Are the right partners solving problems together? And are we monitoring, learning, and adapting as the implementation expands? So across countries, the model looks different, but the core has stayed the same. Adaptive practice, teacher data use, targeted support, and continuous learning. Scaling well means adapting to local realities without losing that core. Next, please. So to close my part, the evidence tells us that HTHT can accelerate learning. But the deeper question is how to make it work well and sustainable in real classrooms and real systems. That is what the panel will explore next. So how teachers and implementers made HTHT work, what changed in classroom, what challenges they face, what system need to put together to sustain and scale this kind of teacher-enabled digital personalized learning. Thank you. I look forward to the discussion that would follow.
Thank you so much, Satya, for that whistle-stop overview of high touch, high tech and the impact from all 4 countries. We wanted to lay that out so that now, as we go into the panel discussion with the implementers, you can see what has been achieved. So I'm delighted now to introduce all 4 panelists. I'm going to introduce you all at the beginning, and then I will call on each of you to answer the questions. So we will hear from Angelica Balaka Atliera, a high-touch, high-tech teacher in the Philippines. She's actually a high-touch, high-tech model teacher because she had especially high fidelity to the high-touch, high-tech approach, and students taught by her and other model teachers had higher learning outcomes. We'll then hear from Gucci Estrella Trinidad, who's Senior Director of Big Bets in Education for the Ayala Foundation, which is one of the oldest corporate foundations in the Philippines, contributing to the nation's development goals by adapting to the evolving needs of stakeholders towards building thriving communities. And you'll see that community approach really come through. And then we'll hear from Diego Miguez, who's Head of Projects Lab at CEBAL. CEBAL is Uruguay's Digital Technology Center for Education Innovation, at the service of education public policy since 2007, and the Project Lab is part of their Innovation Management Division. And then finally, we'll hear from Jojo Lam, the CEO and co-founder of Teach for Cambodia, which has developed 160 local leaders reaching over 70,000 students in high-need public schools in Cambodia, working very much in partnership with government. So to start, I'm going to ask them about their experience with implementing high touch, high tech. And after that, we'll discuss lessons learned and scaling. So firstly, Angelica, I would love to turn to you. As a teacher, are you able to share how your teaching has changed since introducing high touch, high tech? Over to you.
Good day. I am Angelica Filarca Artillera, an elementary teacher and a high-touch, high-tech implementer for the past 3 years at Nagbunga Integrated School in the rice-growing region in the Philippines. So how has my teaching changed since the introduction of the HTHT program? Before HTHT, my classes were mostly teacher-centered. I spent most of the time explaining lesson while my student just listened and answered activities seated at their individual desks. But now that we are implementing the HTHT program in our school, my student often works in groups and have lively conversation about mathematics. For example, when I teach fraction, I always make an improvised pizza. This is to help my student to visualize the concept. Then I ask my student to divide them into half, third, or fourth before solving the assigned activities per group. Well, some learners work on the tablets to become more familiar with the basic concept of our lesson. My other students were discussing answer with their seatmates, comparing different strategy, helping one another, and instead of me to wait to explain everything, my classroom became full of conversation about our topic. And before the HTHT, I had one struggling reader. He found it difficult to read and understand the written instruction during our mathematics lesson. Because of this, he rarely participated in our class discussion and usually waited for me or his classmate to explain first before he could begin. His confidence was also very low because he was afraid of making mistakes. But during the implementation of the HTHT program, I noticed a very remarkable change. He became one of my most active students during our hands-on mathematics activities. Even though reading was still challenging for him, he was able to understand the mathematical concept through the interactive lessons, visual support provided by the platform. Since the platform allows learners to progress at their own pace, he no longer felt pressured to keep up with the rest of the class. He could repeat the lessons, watch instructional videos, and practice skills as many times as he needed until he understand the concept. His confidence grew every week, and he began volunteering, answering, and participating more actively in our classroom activities. Seeing him succeed reminded me that every child has a potential to learn when given the right tools and enough time. And also, after HTHT session, I also asked my student to write a short reflection on what they have learned and what they found challenging. Their reflection helped me understand not only their academic progress, but also how they feel when they are learning about mathematics. For me, HTHT has transformed my classroom into a place where my student is actively learning, participating, and growing. And recently, because it is rainy season here in the Philippines, we had to cancel our face-to-face classes due to a typhoon. However, thanks to HTHT, I was still able to provide activities such as our week 5 lesson on multiplication of fraction, so my student could continue learning even from home. Even though classes were suspended, learning still continued.
Thank you so much, Angelica. It's wonderful to hear those real life examples of the impact. I'm just going to ask you a follow-up question, sorry, which is how you use data from the platform to decide what to do differently with students.
Thank you. The learning data from the HTHT platform has become one of my most valuable teaching tool. After every session, I always check my student mastery level and identify the skills they have mastered and the ones they have still find difficult. For example, after one lesson about fraction, I noticed from the reports that several learners were struggling with comparing fraction. So the next day, instead of reteaching the whole class, I just grouped my student for a short remediation activity using fraction strip or real-life examples like slices of pizza. Meanwhile, my students who have already mastered the lessons were given more challenging application problems. Because of the data, I can immediately identify which student need additional support and which are ready for enrichments, especially since I am teaching classes up to 45 students. It saves me time, allows me to make better instructional decision, and ensures that every learners receive the support they need.
Thank you so much, Angelica. It's so valuable to have your insights. I'm now going to turn to Gucci, who was leading the high touch, high tech implementation in the Philippines and provided support to teachers like yourself. So, Gucci, we'd love to know about the support that you provided to teachers to help them take on the high touch, high tech approach.
Sure, glad to share about that, Amy. There really are three support structures that prove to be most effective and highly valued. First is professional learning communities. The second is embedding the program in existing mechanisms. And third, community support, which is something highlighted earlier by Paige of Equinix. So allow me to say something about each of these three. First being professional learning communities, or we call them PLCs. We're really the foundation of teacher support. Each teacher participated in 72 hours of professional development aimed at strengthening pedagogical strategies and creating collaborative culture. And in our PLCs, there were 5 characteristics. First, they were continuous, not one-off training sessions. So our teachers met regularly and throughout the school year to co-design lessons, analyze student data, as teacher Angelica shared, reflect on their classroom practice, and learn from one another. Secondly, instructional coaching reinforced that learning. So classroom observations, mentoring conversations, and individual feedback help the teachers translate new ideas into everyday classroom practice, allowing them to refine their implementation over time. Thirdly, the PLCs were intentionally job embedded. So participants produced classroom-ready outputs such as lesson plans, assessments, and differentiated instructional resources that they could immediately use with their students, such that each teacher had their own HTHT classroom-ready lesson after every PLC. And moreover, we emphasized peer learning and shared resources. The participants' work products were collected and shared on the program's Google Drive, which every teacher could access. And this school year, we are pleased to share that DepEd Zambales has since adopted this HTHT resource bank on its 2 official platforms. And DepEd continues to encourage the development and sharing among their teachers. And fifth and finally, the PLC served as a safe professional space where teachers were encouraged to experiment, share their challenges openly, reflect on what worked, and continuously improve together. And this culture of trust and peer learning made innovation possible in our professional learning communities. Now, the second valuable strategy, as I mentioned, was embedding support structures within the Department of Education's existing mechanisms. And we did this by providing sessions during the division's standard training, formal multi-day training through what is called INSET, and smaller dose sessions called school-based learning action cells. We also identified and developed teacher leaders like Teacher Angelica so that professional learning could continue and spread beyond the project. And finally, we would like to acknowledge community support as an enabler of implementation. There were non-HTHT teachers in the school that stepped up and provided technical support. Some school heads initiated their own fundraising with local organizations that allowed for one of the schools to improve their digital lab beyond what we initially provided. Teachers like Teacher Angelica shared, she was one of them. They also conducted orientation specifically for parents so they could be HTHT ready at home, providing valuable learning continuity during class cancellations that are a norm here in the Philippines. And finally, we're also happy that local government leaders voluntarily assisted in digital lab maintenance for some schools. So in summary, what we learned from our work is really that the combination of professional learning communities, embedding the program in existing mechanisms, and community support provided a strong start, flexibility and adoption, and a path towards scale and sustainability.
Thank you so much, Gucci. It's wonderful to hear how things were embedded within DepEd structures right from the outset. So I'd like to turn to Diego now. Diego, we'd love to hear more about the high touch, high tech work in Uruguay and the importance of that ongoing teacher professional development that we know you put a lot of attention and support to as well. Over to you.
Thank you, Amy. It's a pleasure to join this webinar. First of all, I would say that I feel completely identified with what Gucci was saying about the key factors in terms of teacher professional development. But yeah, so from our perspective, we always knew that this was a crucial point in every sense in terms of implementing HTHT. And so I guess one of the key factors was just treating teacher professional development and ongoing support as the same thing. So our support for teachers was part of the teacher professional development, not only the on-site training sessions, and we knew that we had to give that support. So the first thing that we did was just a small study on how the teachers would like to be supported, which way they want to be stayed in communication with us. So is it by email? Is it by WhatsApp? So okay, so we define those channels, those communication channels, and then we knew that and I guess this is something worldwide, but teaching tends to be a lonely activity, a challenging activity. So we stated an ongoing communication with messages of encouragement, responding questions. We always gave the opportunity to ask questions about the implementation, about the platform, about anything that they would have. The second thing, I think it is like as Gucci stated, so providing with classroom-ready resources. Let's say, okay, so we want them to implement the HTHT, but specifically, what are we talking about? So we understood that teachers need to understand what we are asking for them to do, what we are expecting them to do in their classrooms, and maybe just stepping one step at a time, what they are expected to do in their classroom. So the guidance in those terms, the lesson plans, even the didactic proposals and resources was pedagogical resources was very important for us and very important for the teacher support. And I guess like a third important point was for the ongoing teacher professional development and support. We needed them to really experience the value of the platform and the value of the methodology. If they didn't find the value of it, they won't adopt it. So we need to think those webinars, those on-site training sessions, and we need to plan that they have time for experiencing the platform, experiencing the methodology. And that's something our pedagogical teams really focus on, adapting and contextualizing the methodology for our country, for our reality. And that was a key factor as well. So like I said, if any methodology, any platform, any technology is really good, but it doesn't work for the context, I mean, it's like nothing, you know? And that's, we knew it, but this project was a confirmation of it. So technology doesn't by itself won't engage learning. So we need the combination of those, and that combination is like it comes from the reality and the context in our classrooms, and that is something that we like we put first in the teacher professional development and in our support for them. And I guess that's the way our pedagogical teams are like planning the teacher professional development from that end. So every training session, every course that we have now makes that approach. So how the teacher can adopt it and what value comes from that methodology and that strategy.
Thank you so much, Diego. I think it's so important to remember the rationale and the thinking behind an approach and making sure teachers have the opportunity to explore and experience it themselves. Thank you. So Jojo, I'd like to come to you next. We'd love to hear what's different about a high-touch, high-tech classroom in Cambodia.
Yes, thanks, Amy, and everyone on this call for having been on this journey together. A very wise friend and advisor of mine said that if I remember nothing else about HTHT, to focus on what visible changes I can see in the classroom. So I want to start by looking at it from the teacher perspective. One visible shift is that how teachers engage with the evidence of student learning and what that does in the classroom for them. And so having access to students' data goes beyond the teachers having assumptions or waiting until they have monthly exams to determine how they can precisely support their students. What I also started to see is that students moved more in the classroom and moved with intention because they could go and approach students who they knew had gaps and had misperceptions about the learning. They could go and coach, they can facilitate, they can pull small groups of students together. And that also enabled them to then focus on higher order thinking skills. And so our teachers are trained to use high touch time to develop grit and collaboration and growth mindset. They bring a lot of project-based learning into the classroom. And so students would receive project-based learning through entrepreneurial lessons that we teach. And so they would find themselves applying math to calculate interest rates on business loans or conversion rates for currencies. And what that did was create a ripple effect where their parents and their teachers and the community could see the students applying learning, which made a difference for those communities. The other part of this would be around the shift in students' engagement and their behaviors. And so being on the adaptive learning platform, we know that students use tech for many things, but using it for learning gave them a sense of ownership for their learning and being able to revisit content as they needed, persisting through challenges. So both through the design of the adaptive platform, but also through teacher practice, it reinforced for students that mistakes are okay. Their relationship with mistakes shifted, that it's part of the learning process, which is a big deal in cultures where making mistakes can feel very heavy for students. And so building that growth mindset in, I think was another visible shift that I could see.
Fantastic, thank you. I think it's really great to hear not only about the improvements in maths learning outcomes that we've heard, but also that improvement in those capabilities and higher order skills that actually we know are really important for work and life or whatever someone does. So it's great to hear that combination. So I'm going to transition to the second set of questions. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to ask you to be a little bit brief if possible, but it's still really, really valuable to hear your responses here. So the second set of questions are really around lessons learned and about scaling and working with government. So Jojo, I'm going to come to you first. We would love to hear about some of the lessons actually that were learned from that implementation in Cambodia, and that others perhaps could learn from if they want to consider this elsewhere. So Jojo, back to you.
Okay, thank you. So thank you to Satya for presenting our case beautifully. There were definitely many different challenges in the implementation. And the first would definitely be around the infrastructure. It's not something we can ignore. And we worked with several different school contexts. So many of our adaptation and implementation came with working within the constraints of those schools, rotational devices, different schedules. And so moving forward, one big lesson learned is to really look at school readiness around this, but investing in infrastructure so that students can have more access and it could be more equitable. The second was around digital readiness and training. We found that 95% of our students had never actually used devices in this way. And so having to build that in and ensuring that that is part of the teacher's training and also supporting students to properly onboard and leverage technology. And of course, for this to be scalable, the language and comprehension was a barrier, especially on the assessment side. And so continuing to invest in ensuring that local language is part of the design. And last but not least, our philosophy around this is to ensure localization and system alignment. And so the parts where we ran into barriers were, even though the adaptive technology platform was pacing with our curriculum, it could be very difficult if the students are learning individually how the teacher would then translate that into an instructional strategy for the entire class. And also with assessment schedules. In Cambodia, we have a monthly assessment exam. So students could be learning at different paces and they could be growing. But if it's not aligned with the pacing of the school system, then it's not as ready, or it's less likely to have the effects that we want it to have. So those would be the key lessons learned for us.
Great, thank you very much, Jojo. And perhaps when we get to the question and answers, people may have questions about how some of those challenges were addressed. But that's just a reminder to start thinking of your questions, because I'll be coming to the Q&A shortly. So Gucci, I'll come back to you. We'd love to hear, I mean, you've mentioned it already in your first question about how you engaged with DepEd, and how you're now working with them to scale high touch, high tech further.
Yeah, so the implementation in the Philippines is really part of a broader coalition of several mission-aligned organizations, Department of Education, the LGU, many corporate partners, and including Khan Academy, which is our high-tech component, right? And our experience really suggested that sustainable scale comes not from adding the new programs, but really strengthening what exists in our system and building local ownership from the very beginning. So I talked earlier about how we designed HTHT to align with the existing professional development rather than creating a parallel system. And so thus making HTHT part of the teacher's regular professional learning. And in fact, this school year in Zambales, over 500 public elementary teachers were trained through the division's annual inset or summer training, thereby allowing the approach to now reach every elementary school in the province through DepEd's own platform. And we're very grateful for the trust that the Division of Zambales has given to the program and its teachers who are really embracing HTHT. I think part of that is also because we really wanted to develop teacher leaders, right? So not just classroom implementers. Beyond the impact on their own classrooms, the program now has a cohort of 28 teacher trainers. 5 of those were model HTHT teachers from the pilot, and then an additional 23 volunteer teachers newly trained who now co-facilitate the training, mentor their peers, and support the quality implementation. So what we're seeing in DepEd Zambales really has them and the local champions leading implementation, while we at Ayala Foundation are gradually shifting towards more coaching, technical support, and some quality assurance. And in fact, just last week, the DepEd division released a memo encouraging those 500 some teachers to implement HTHT at least twice a week. And they have incorporated core HTHT practices into their M&E tools that are used on a regular basis in the schools. So what we're really seeing through this pilot, we're able to see how philanthropy and CSR has really de-risked an innovative program, and that with the solid evidence that we've all been able to generate in the 4 countries we're hearing from today, public investment is now able to take over.
That is fantastic to hear, especially Zambales including it in their training to all 500 teachers within the province. That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Gucci. I'd like to turn to Diego, because it's a couple of years now since that you have implemented high touch, high tech, and we would love to hear what's happened since, and how the model has been used or harnessed since then. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. One important point I would like to outline here is that in Ceibal, I mean, in terms of conditions that help us throughout these years since HTHT was implemented. So Ceibal is a public policy, so we have some pre-existing conditions that helps us, like devices, connectivity, infrastructure, digital infrastructure. I mean, they're like a big help in those terms. And what I really want to outline here is again the adaptation and localization and contextualization that we did, and especially our pedagogical teams did. I think it was like the key factor in terms of curriculum alignment, in terms of incorporating in the professional development strategy. So we don't call it anymore we don't call it HTHT anymore. It's part of how we understand the interaction between teacher, technology, and students. Our whole AI strategy, and in this AI era, it's really important to focus on how we approached it, and an HTHT approach we think is the key for the future and for creating again new pedagogical interaction between technology and teachers for making better decisions and for personalizing learning. So we have, and we are focusing on the teacher professional development, but we are also like deploying a couple of projects on RCTs, again, evaluation with this approach and with learnings that we took from the HTHT implementation in the first place. And not only in math, but also in and also using our platforms and our technology. And this approach is how we evaluate any ed tech possibility and opportunity we have. For example, we are experiencing AI tutoring systems in math, and we conceive it as from scratch as an HTHT approach project. Like I said, we don't call it HTHT anymore because it's part of our strategy. It's Uruguayan now, and Ceibal adopted it in terms of the teacher professional development, but as well as planning a project and planning an impact evaluation. And that's something that we been experiencing from since HTHT project in 2022 and 2023. So we'll see from here.
Thank you, Diego. I love the way that you actually say that you don't need to call it high touch, high tech anymore, because it's just how you go about it. You have that embedded in the way that you work, that combination of technology and teacher and support. And it's great to hear that it's been continued and it's been embedded in a sustainable and scalable way, which is obviously what we're always hoping for. So thank you. Really appreciate you answering all of our questions. Now we do have time for some questions from the audience. I haven't seen any in the chat, so if you would like to ask some questions, please do put them in the chat and I will read them out. I can see a couple here, so thank you. Keep the questions coming and I will ask the questions. So one of the questions from Dorothea is there a write-up document report that could be referenced after the webinar? So I would just ask our colleagues to please put all the reports in the chat. We have country reports for each country. We have the external evaluation reports. So please do put them in the chat and we can also send them out in the follow-up email along with the recording and the slides. So thank you for that. Another question here is around something that Professor Lee said about the risk of students becoming passive servants of AI. And so the question is, like, how does the high touch, high tech framework ensure that adaptive platforms go beyond simply feeding content at the right level and instead foster critical thinking? I think it's a really, really interesting question. I wonder if there is anyone on the panel who would like to answer that. I can start with my what's the word rationale. In the meantime, if someone wants from the panel wants to put their hand up, then please go ahead. I think that's why we've always called this high tech, high touch, because we know that the technology is just continually evolving, and I'm sure the adaptive platforms will keep evolving, keep employing more and more latest technology. And at the moment, I guess they are adapting to the level and then giving students content to practice at that level. And we are asking our teachers to provide the critical thinking component, like the applied learning, working collaboratively, doing the project-based learning. So at the moment, the way that high touch, high tech was originally conceived was that important balance between what the technology is used for and what the teacher is used for. But I also wouldn't be surprised if technology develops to be able to also prompt that critical thinking type activity. And I think that's why, like, the theory behind the approach is that it has to be able to evolve as technology evolves. But I don't know if anyone from the panel would like to add to that. I might go to Diego. Yeah, because you've probably done this, more thinking around this.
Good. Yeah, and it's a great question. I mean, that's something that keeps us awake in Ceibal because, like I said, to stand out with a national strategy, that's something that we think of, and that allowed us to work hand in hand with our providers, with our technology providers, and thinking about how we can plan a work in progress together, and having those connections and a co-designed kind of way in the technology platform, and I mean, aiming to that would be like the I would say that was a key factor for us as well. So now every updated any update in the platform, and they are having AI updating and updates in the platform. So we really want to talk with them and to communicate and to have I mean, exchanging ideas on how that new update can have like a Socrative approach, and how the scaffolding pedagogical system and AI system has in terms of not giving any answer to the student, but instead giving them with examples, new questions, and new challenges. So I'm really optimistic about that. I think that edtech companies are really focusing on that approach, and it's mainly in AI approach with scaffolding and creating critical thinking in students.
Great, thank you, Diego. So we have another question here about how the experience has been from transitioning from external funding to having more support from government, and what has worked particularly well on the advocacy side. So Gucci, I'm going to ask you this question because I think you've done a great job at really working closely with DepEd and, as you said, build it into their structures. How did you what's the word, encourage them to do that? What was useful in terms of the information that you shared to do that?
I think first, like the rigorous evidence from the evaluation really helped garner a lot of good attention, right, in a good way. And then all the support and the local stories of how it happened on the ground was also very helpful. We are fortunate to be able to host some of our partners in the classroom of teacher Angelica and many others like her, so they could see it in action, right? So that the theory really comes to life in the faces of the teachers, the students, and the school communities where it happens. Throughout, and as I mentioned, since the very beginning, saying, we serve as an integrator of many like-minded organizations. So there was really constant communication, sharing progress, asking for guidance in terms of alignment and direction, to ensure that as the work evolves, as we learn more from the implementation, we are hearing from the voices on the ground, but also at sort of the central office or the national level, to ensure that what's happening in the classroom remains aligned with the priorities and the needs of the communities.
Great, thank you very much. Now we have a question. Angelica, I'm going to ask you this question if you're comfortable answering it, but it's, what is the limitation of high touch, high tech? So when you're using the high touch, high tech approach in the classroom, do you find there are any limitations or challenges that you're facing, and how do you overcome them?
Thank you for that question. Like any educational approach, HTHT has also limitation. Understanding this limitation is important because it shows how this HTHT is not replacement for a good teaching. For example, here in the Philippines, there are a lot of several limitations that we are facing, including its dependence on reliable technology, the need for the teacher training, implementation of the quality, and the long-term funding. It is also cannot be replaced, the role of the teachers, and the HTHT is more effective when technology is combined with skills teaching, strong school support, and just like what Ms. Gucci has said, and the consistent support of the Department of Education alongside with the stakeholders, so that this will serve so we can continue implement the high touch, high tech without limiting the limitation of it.
Thank you very much. So the next question, I think I will answer, because the question is a fair one. Like, is high touch, high tech one model or different interventions, I guess, under the same label? And I guess what we can see high touch, high tech is an approach. So it's really the combination of some form of adaptive personalized learning, because that's what the evidence shows improves learning outcomes, in combination with really strong support, pedagogical support for teachers to improve teaching, alongside, rigorous monitoring and working closely with the government. So the slide that Satya showed on the, if you like, the key elements, that's how we conceive it. But the way that is contextualized and implemented is completely up to the country and the government and the implementing partner. So the technology is selected locally. The implementing partner draws on its own experience of teacher training and what works in that context. It's embedded in whatever the government structures are. So it's really an approach that anyone can use. We're strong advocates for it. It's just that personalized component is really, really important, because that's what the evidence shows leads to improved learning outcomes. So I hope that's clear. Okay, any final questions? I don't think so. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists for one takeaway that you would like people listening to hear, which is, if you recommended that, or if another country, for example, or another teacher or another school leader or whoever the audience is, would like to go about implementing high touch, high tech, what would be your one word of advice to them? So Jojo, I might ask you to go first, if you could share that, and if we just have a quick answer from each of you, and then we'll go to the close. Jojo, you're on mute.
I would say we've been on this journey for almost a decade, and for us, it was about being bold about addressing educational inequities, and to go up against it, we needed something that was super innovative. And so at the end of the day, I would just say that this is an innovation, and embracing innovation is a real core capability in order to implement HTHT.
Thank you, Jojo. Gucci, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I agree with what Jojo said and what's been shared previously. I think an additional point would be really investing in evidence-based decision making, very much like we ask our teachers to do in the classroom, right? Start from what the students know and build from there. And so being able to collect that meaningful impact evidence from the very onset really adds color and deepens our understanding, so we can support the teachers and the students and the communities that are trying to do better to address our learning crisis.
Thank you, Gucci. Diego, I'll come to you next.
Thank you, Amy. I think I would add that implementation is as important as the technology itself. And by implementation, I mean like pedagogical implementation. How does this look like in the classroom? What the teachers needs to keep in mind? What are they doing? What the students are doing? So those kind of really focusing on that implementation is really as important as the technology and the adaptive platform. And like I said, in this AI era, that's even more important. So AI gives us the opportunity, maybe a historical opportunity of scaling personalized learning. But we need to really think about the interaction in the classroom, how the teacher interacts with the AI, and maybe the student interacts with the AI, how the teacher keeps control of it, and how the teacher makes better decisions in terms of personalized learning. So I would say, yeah, implementation.
Thank you so much. And Angelica, it would be great to hear from your perspective as a teacher. What would you say to other teachers who might be considering harnessing this approach in their classroom?
I will just end my thoughts and sharing my personal experience with my favorite quotation. It is, give a man a fish and you will feed him for a day, but teach a man how to fish and you will feed him for a lifetime. For me, that is exactly what HTHT represent. It is not simply about helping student to answer today's mathematics lesson. It is about equipping them with the skills, confidence, and mindset to become independent learners who know how to find answer, solve problems, and continue learning after they leave my classroom. And as an HTHT implementer here in the Philippines and as a teacher, my greatest success is not measured by how much I teach, but how much my students learn on their own. And HTHT has transformed my classroom from a place where my students depend on the teachers for every answers into a community where they take ownership of their learning, work at their own pace, and believe in their ability to succeed. Let me just end this with the famous quotation here in the Philippines, ang edukasyon ang susi sa tagumpay. And HTHT has given our learners not just knowledge, but confidence and skills to continue learning on their own. That's all.
Thank you so much, Angelica. That was such a fitting close to the panel. So I would really like to say a huge thank you to each one of you, Angelica, Gucci, Jojo, and Diego, for sharing your insights on what it's been like to implement high touch, high tech in practice. We've learned so much from you, and really thank you for all the hard work that's gone into this to get the results that we've shared earlier. So a huge thank you to all four of you. And now I'm going to ask Romana from Fab AI to say a few words. Fab AI have been doing a lot of work on AI for education, and we really wanted Romana to kind of situate this conversation within that broader work, and to hear from her, what she sees as the potential. So, Romana, if you are there, over to you.
Thank you very much, Amy. And first of all, a big congratulations to all of you. I really think this is a very strong example of how AI can make a meaningful difference in the classroom. And as you also all said, it is not just because of the technology, but also about how you helped implement it. So with that, building on what you said, I would leave you with 3 points that stood out to me. The first one is that you really need to start with the teacher in mind, right? Although some of you seems to already have adopted this approach in your day-to-day, the name still starts with the high touch before the high tech. And I think that's really the right way to think about it, right? We've seen many tools that are really great, but that doesn't guarantee the uptake. And so I really think there was a good example of how you can create this balance between putting the user first and the technology, and also thinking from the teacher's perspective how you can help them grow and use this as a professional development at the same time. So with that, I think I would encourage everyone who is thinking of a similar approach to really think from the start how you involve the teachers, how you can support them throughout the process, and how you can also adapt the design based on the feedback. So that is the first. Second, also several of you mentioned it, the context really matters. I think what stood out to me is how you embedded working with the governments from the start as well, how you thought of the local infrastructure, and also about making sure that the products you chose in each geography are aligned with the local curriculum. And we know this is important, but it's not so easy to do. We've even seen from the different countries, you did need to take quite a lot to implement them. What I find encouraging is that I see in the space more new collaborations between also researchers and local implementers to create more of the shared infrastructure for the products to adapt to new contexts more easily, like the knowledge graphs, where the curriculum is embedded and then the products can more quickly change across contexts, but it's still a longer process. And so I think based on what is available, I think this approach did a very good job with that. But what you mentioned, making sure it's embedded in the education system and the realities of the classroom is really key. And third, as you build the products and implement the approach, it is so key to think about evidence. We at Fab AI have done mapping of products, of AI EdTech enabled products. And we've seen that from over 350 products, less than 9% had any kind of evidence about it. So that is why we also started the QA facility, where we are building new benchmark, where we are working with organizations and do evaluations to change that situation. And that is why I applaud you so much that you not only did this amazing program across countries, but that you are sharing your learnings, that you did the studies and also organized this webinar. So yeah, all in all, I think for me, this is really a good example of how actually AI can make a difference. If you think of the user, if you think of the context and really think not only about the innovation, but also throughout the process, what works for whom and under which circumstances. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And back to you, Amy.
Thank you so much, Romana. And that's a good segue into, I should also say a big thank you to our evaluators who, Yoon Soo Park in particular from University of Illinois, Chicago, has been involved in the evaluation of all 4 high touch, high tech pilots and has brought, so we've had a really consistent approach to how they've been evaluated. And Janice Kim has been involved in the last couple. So a really big shout out to the evaluators. And we're really looking forward to seeing actually how that evaluation approach develops to try and capture some more of this high touch part of the high touch, high tech. And some of the things that Juho mentioned right at the beginning about, you know, the importance of relationships, and the panelists have mentioned about grit, about collaboration, and how the use of adaptive learning technologies can really help teachers free up some time to focus on those things. So a huge thank you to everyone on this webinar, to Professor Lee, to Paige, to Satya, to our 4 panelists, and to Romana for sharing all of these insights, and to you all for joining the webinar. Like I said, we will send an email out with the presentation slides, with the reports. I really encourage you to reach out to us if you've got any questions. My colleagues Satya and Maddie will put their email addresses in the chat. And we'd love to hear more about how you're going about personalized and adaptive learning in your context, and whether this is an approach that you think could work. So once again, a huge thank you to everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day, evening, morning, or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you again.